In this video, I want to go through the timings of when you might want to do your wedding speeches during your wedding breakfast. As with all my wedding hints and tips videos, they are just little bits of advice. I'm in no way saying that you should do it one way or the other. It's just me passing on a little bit of knowledge given the number of weddings that I've photographed. So let's jump in with option number one when it comes to the timings of when you might want to do your wedding speeches. So in my opinion, I think there are three options when it comes to when you might want to do your speeches during the wedding breakfast. I think there is one option which is probably the best. I think there's one that's fine if that's what happens. And then there's another option which I think is terrible and should just disappear. So option one, I think, is doing the speeches before you start your wedding breakfast. For me, I think this is the better option of the three. I think your wedding breakfast room will probably be at its neatest because people would have come in, they would have sat down, and then you guys get introduced into the room. Everyone's up, they're at it. There's no empty wine bottles, there's no plates that haven't been removed. It's probably at its neatest. I think most of the wedding guests and yourselves will probably be looking your best. You haven't had food and undone buttons and things like that. So I think aesthetically for photos, I think it's probably the best time to do it. I think it also helps that the people doing the speeches, they can get the speeches done and out of the way, and so they can enjoy the food. Which I think is, quite an important thing to consider. The people doing speeches, it's a privilege, but it's also quite a stressy thing. And I also think that it means that you've probably got everybody's attention because they've just come into the room, they're up, you've just been introduced, the napkins maybe are being flying around, and then all of a sudden it's into the speeches and you've got everyone. No one's drifted away, the attention is based on you. Now, there are a couple of negatives of doing the speeches before the food. Depending on the time of your wedding ceremony and when you are sitting down for the wedding breakfast, it might fall in that kind of time where people haven't eaten for a long while, and so they're kind of hungry and just like, right, come on, we want to get to the good stuff, we want to get to the food. So you got to kind of consider that. I also think probably for the venue, it's probably the most risky time because they'll probably say to you, your speech is 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, however long. And what they don't want is for you to go over that time limit because they will be preparing the starters, they'll be preparing the food, and so they don't want to burn it, they don't want to let it go cold. So I have had weddings where the speeches have gone on longer than the venue were expecting, and so the venue then start coming out just kind of winding it up sort of thing to get the speeches done so the food can be brought out. But I think this is probably the best option. Do your wedding speeches before the food. But let's look at number two, because that one also might be an option for you. So option number two is doing the speeches after the food. Now, I think this is the option that most venues push couples down because the venue don't have to worry about timings of when to prepare the food. They can just bring it out as and when it's ready, as opposed to doing the speeches before the food where the venue are kind of a little bit nervous of how long the speeches are going to go on for. So doing your speeches at the end of the food just means the venue have kind of done their bit and then it's kind of down to the speeches. I think another positive would be that it means that people who are really hungry, maybe the timings of the wedding day mean they're not quite sure whether they should have eaten or not before the wedding. So it just means that they kind of get fed and then they can enjoy their speeches. I think this option does have some negative points. So for instance, I think the room will probably be at its messiest at the end of the food. There'll be wine bottles, there'll be empty drinks glasses, there might be plates and stuff on the tables. People have taken off jackets, waistcoats, things like that. So aesthetically, it might not look, the room might not look at its best, and the people might not look at its best. Now, that doesn't take away from the moments that are happening during the speeches, but it is something to consider. I think also doing the speeches after the food means that the people doing the speeches have had to sit through eating the food. They might not enjoy it because they're nervous about doing the speeches. I have seen it where the people doing the speeches really nervous, and so they have a drink to kind of settle them down, and then they'll have another and another and another, to the point where they can barely stand up, let alone do a wedding speech. So that's something to consider if you do think you might have a nervous speaker. And also, I think sometimes at the end of the wedding breakfast, certainly during the summer months, if it's nice and warm outside, people will drift. So once they've kind of had their puddings, they'll go to the bar, they'll go and stand outside, they'll go and enjoy the sunshine. And so you've got to kind of corral everyone to come back in because it's the wedding speeches. So that's something to also consider. But like I said, I think this one is the one that the venues prefer you to go down because they don't have to worry about the timings. That's that one. So let's look at the third option, which is a horrible option that I've seen being quite popular in 2022, and it just needs to go away because it just doesn't work. So option 3 is doing wedding speeches in between different courses. Now, I've racked my brains and I cannot think of a positive... No, I can't think of anything positive of doing speeches in between the courses. So, for example, you might find that starter comes out, starter gets cleared away, and then you might find father of the bride and maybe the groom do their speeches before the main, then the main comes out, then the main gets cleared away, and then maybe it's best man, maid of honour will do it before the pudding. It's odd because I think it's the worst of the other two options. So the room will look at its worst because you've got plates, you've got bottles, you've got glasses, because the venue probably wouldn't have had time to take everything away. For the venue, they're not quite sure when the mains are going to be needed or the puddings are going to be needed. I've seen it where... people are still eating during the speeches, and all you can hear is the clinking of knives and forks and things like that. And depending on your venue, some venues aren't the quickest at bringing food out, and you might find that, you've got a couple of tables that haven't had their main, and now we're doing some more speeches. So then they've got to wait for their main for maybe another half an hour whilst everybody else has had theirs. It's I haven't seen a wedding where I thought it worked, and I cannot for the life of me think of any positives of doing it this way. But that is option number 3. So as I said in my intro to the video, these are just kind of talking points. They're just kind of idea generators for you to kind of make you think about certain things, and me just offering advice for the things that I've kind of seen over the years at weddings. I'm in no way telling you to go option 1, 2 or 3, or there might be a 4th, I don't know. But I think for me, option number 1 makes the most sense, then option number 2, and then option number 3 just shouldn't be done. So that's it. Hopefully you find this useful. If you have any queries or questions, get in touch, but I'll see you in the next video.